Hello, G. Elizabeth. Hello, hello. Oh, also, Julia, if you can speak up a little bit, because
Yes. Right, like
okay.
that is fine.
Yeah, it's a little, you sound a little lower than normal. In the meantime, if you have any friends that would like to join us, please let them know. Um, because we are going to start very, very soon. And Julia, let me know if you need any help with technical support.
Very good.
Perfect. I can see your screen now. Awesome.
You'll guide me through it because I cannot see anything.
Yes.
Maybe it's better if I switch to headphones.
We
It was better, right?
yes. I can see it now. I can see your screen now.
Okay.
Um, so in today's session, we are going to talk about the two express entry streams, which is Canadian Experience Class and the new Ontario Immigrants Nominee Program. And this webinar will be presented by Hanson Immigration Counselor, Ms. Julia Berdiansky. I'll be here to assist Julia with any technical support and Q&A, so don't forget to stick around until the end because we will try to answer all of your questions. And remember to use your the Q&A box to ask your questions to make sure that we don't miss any of your questions. Um, so I think we I mean, I think we can start. Yeah, without further ado, I think we can start now. Julia, over to you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. We are all here foreign students, international students, and most of you came here with the hope to make your study permit, your graduation, the first step on the route of becoming a permanent resident. Just the first step in your new life, in your career, making it here in Canada. So I hear a lot. I'm in this business for 20 years, 8 years, by the way, and I frequently have these questions. Clients, everybody will ask me, will I qualify under Express Entry? What kind of program is Express Entry? Because people are here Express Entry this, Express Entry that. It's fast, it's efficient. Government also adds its promo materials. Can I submit a paper Express Entry file directly? And then they're asking me, there is one economic immigration program, Express Entry, because we don't know anything else, right? And I want to stay in Canada. How do I do that? So try to like pause for maybe 10, 15 seconds and see if you know the answers before we go to the details, right? So I'm gonna share with you the answers now. Okay, will I qualify under Express Entry? Well, I don't know because Express Entry, it's not a program. It's a management system for several economic programs, for Canadian Experience Class, for federal skilled workers, and for federal skilled trades, and also for PNPs, which are also in a way could be both federal skilled workers and it is economic class. So what kind of program is Express Entry? Again, Express Entry is not a program. It is a system. To qualify in order to be able to submit your application under the Express Entry management system, you have to qualify first in one of the programs, and one of which we will be in detail reviewing today. It's Canadian Experience Class, because everybody who is here online are Canadian students, international students studying in Canada, most of you. And after you graduate, you will all have a right to apply and receive a postgraduate work permit. Postgraduate work permit, someone will get it for 1 year, someone will get it for 3 years. rarely people get it for 2 years. It's a different, totally different presentation about that. But this would be actually the first step to get into the Canadian experience class, because Canadian experience class, to qualify in the Canadian experience class, you need at least 1 year of Canadian experience in Canada. Okay, I'm a little bit ahead of myself. So this actually covers about immigration program and express entry. It's just only a small part of all immigration programs. Currently in all Canada, overall, it's about 80 of them. And because of COVID, they're popping up, new are popping up, the other one are closing. So it's a very fluid situation. Well, I cannot really show you my hair today because my camera is broken, but it was just a rhetorical question, just to lift your spirits a little bit. So permanent residence in Canada, there is, you can see here a pie chart. Economic classes constitute about 55 to 60% of all immigrants, which are also refugees and family classes. So out of these economic classes, Canadian experience class for the last, I wouldn't probably lie if I say more than a year, is the main program, because due to the COVID epidemic in the world, pandemic, uh, Canadian immigration does not have the capacity to let all the people, even already with visa, in Canada because of the quarantine and travel restrictions. So what they're doing, they are trying to push as many candidates through the system who are already in Canada. And if you're already in Canada, chances are you may qualify under the Canadian experience class, because if you hadn't been, then you wouldn't be able to put your profile in the system. So what is express entry? Express entry. Again, it is not a program, it is a system of Canadian immigration, IRCC, Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, for managing the intake of economic immigration applications, which are submitted on and after January 1st, 2015. In the following classes: federal skilled workers, federal skilled trades, Canadian experience class, and provincial nominee class. So before little delving into history, before 2015, it was first past the post, first come, first serve system, which led to clogged visa posts because as per the Canadian Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, the main law for immigration in Canada, it is possible to, it used to be possible to submit an application only in the territory or country where you are residing, or the one of your nationality, which obviously leads to huge waiting times, because from some countries, people want to come and they are more numerous in population. And here we go. So this is a management system which predetermines who comes to Canada from the pool. So in order to qualify, eligibility in one of these classes must be determined and proven before entering the express entry pool. So as of January 1st, 2015, this is the only pathway for the only way to submit your application in the federal economic immigration category. Okay, so about 80% of complete express entry applications are processed in 6 months or less, or this is what IRCC promises. Again, it depends on how well the application prepared, how well you provide all the documents, how fast you reply to all the follow-up requests for documents or information. And one more note, if you plan to live in Quebec, you cannot use express entry because Quebec's economic immigration programs are not managed through express entry. They have their own immigration system. They have their own system, which looks like express entry, which is similar to express entry, and which is called ARIMA. Mostly, if you don't speak French, this is not for you. So how the express entry system works: you have to build a profile to enter the pool of candidate. That would be stage 1. And after your profile sits there for under 1 year, hopefully you have enough points and your profile is drawn from the pool every 2 weeks, sometimes every week, sometimes once a month. IRCC sweeps through the pool of candidates and pulls candidates to submit, sends them an invitation to apply, ITA. inviting them to submit a full application for permanent residence in Canada. So what is a profile? So first of all, under the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act or Immigration and Refugee Protection Regulations, these are the abbreviations that you see here. This is not an application. So if when you're building your profile, when the systems ask you, if it's your second profile, for example, and you haven't been drawn yet, if the system asks you if you already submitted an application and immigration profile is your only application, then you say no. But obviously, because you are students and you received all study permits, you already submitted an application. So when you answer this question, you obviously say yes, because you did submit an application for study permit, you were approved, and you have your UCI number, your Unified Client Identifier or Client ID number. So it is an expression of interest in immigration to Canada, saying that, hey, Canada, pick me, I'm here, I'm in the pool. So it is an algorithm. So you know there is no live person who looks at a profile, it's all computerized and managed by artificial intelligence. I know it's difficult to combine the words artificial intelligence thinking about express entry, but these are actually the algorithmic basics of future AI that we are seeing in sci-fi movies, hopefully not that sinister. The profile confirms eligibility in one of economic programs, Federal Skilled Workers, Federal Skilled Trades, or Canadian Experience class, and awards comprehensive ranking system points, CRS points. The highest ranking applicants receive invitations to apply for permanent residence. So let's say when the IRCC announced a draw being held, for example, usually it's on Wednesdays, not necessarily, when it says that the pass mark, the score was 450, for example, it means that everyone who received 450 and over will be swept from the pool, will receive invitation to apply. It may not happen immediately. Usually it takes up to 24 hours, sometimes even a couple of days if the system is lagging. The historic draw took place on February 13th, talk about 13th, right? This year, where the pass mark dropped to 75 points and 37,000 people were invited. I am not sure how it goes right now, but I'm pretty sure that some of them just received their biometrics requests. So after receipt of ITA, you have 60 days to submit complete permanent residence applications. Those of you who have already profiles in the system, you may say, how come it is 90 days? No, it's you always be in 60 days. 90 days was the period was instituted last year after the pandemic started sweeping across the globe, because all the places which you have to go to get your documents were closed. So IRCC got you an extra 30 days. So as pandemic is subsiding from June 29th, from yesterday, it's back to 60 days again. I have compiled a little table for you, so showing what are the minimum qualifications are for the CEC, Canadian Experience Class requirements. So the main is a Canadian work experience. You need 1 year of Canadian work experience. The work must be paid. It has to be performed within 3 years of date of submission of the application for permanent residence. This abbreviation is Application for Permanent Residence, or APR. Now, you would need to do this job, this work, perform it for at least 12 months, and you would have need to work at least 1,560 hours. It's not either or, it's and. So it means that if you have been working for 10 months and you have already far more than 1560 hours, you still don't qualify. It has to be 12 months. And out of 12 months, whatever's being reasonable, you're allowed 2 weeks of not being working. Of course, if you already attained this 1560 hours, because normal vacation in Canada is 2 weeks. So the reasonable accommodation for vacation is acknowledged in the system. And the work has to be in a skilled occupation. Skilled occupation, it means National Occupation Classification Code, NOC, 0, A, or B. Now, the good thing is, It does not have to be one specific knock. It may be several different. For example, you worked for 6 months, you had a contract, I don't know, as a mobile application developer, for example. So you worked full time, you worked 40 hours, you worked for 6 months in this occupation. That's a certain knock A. And then the contract ended, you didn't find anything else. I said, uh, my friend is going on maternity leave and she is a administrative assistant. I'm trying, I'll just try to work there because I need to pay my bills, and obviously I want to immigrate faster, so I need to exercise my work permit. So then you go and work part-time there, but it's not enough. And your friend says, listen, I have a night shift as a food service supervisor, for example, in McDonald's, right? And it's also a skilled occupation, it's knock B. So you combine all these three knocks and they're all allowed for Canadian experience class. Moreover, the work does not have to be continuous. It may be in bits and bytes. It bites. So let's say if in 14 or 15 months you accumulated this 15, 60 hours and have in total 12 months, or 3 months here, 6 months there, and then a couple of weeks there, and then maybe a month and a half here. Once you accumulate 12 months of work and minimum 1,560 hours, you are allowed to start building your profile. You have a first qualifier in Express Entry Stage 1. So the second important qualifier is language. And again, in Canadian experience class, it's much easier than in federal skilled workers, for example, because you are allowed to score at CLB 5. It means if you are going to pass IELTS, your score may be 5 in all bands, in each and every band. And this is in case you're keeping working in knock B occupation. If you are working in knock 0, which is management, or A, professional, then you have to score at least at CLB 7. So it's a minimum necessary score. Let's say if you are going for IELTS test, this would be reaching a band 6 in each ability. So again, it has to be in each ability. It does not have to be, it is not the combined score. It has to be in each ability. So let's say you score 7 in each ability and then 6 in one, then your score drops. You cannot say that you scored higher. It will be CLB 7. So the CLB is determined for the lowest reached ability. The validity of your IELTS or CELPIP exam, it's 2 years since you got your result. So sometimes when you submit your application and you submit your profile and you get your invitation to apply and you are collecting documents and you're nervous because your IELTS results are expiring, you have to look at your test. Obviously, don't get to the point where it's going to be expiring before, like on the day you are submitting or one after, but look at the test. I don't know how it's going to be for those who are taking the test now, but before it used to be that you take the test and then in 2 weeks you get the results. So the first date would be the date of taking the test. The second date is the date of the results. So you need the date of the results. So if you are panicking, then you may still have 2 weeks. But don't be too smug about it, because remember, express entry works on GMT time. It means about 7 hours ahead of Canada. If you are trying to submit the application at the last day, the day number 60 of your ITA, you may be too late, because if you log in after 7 p.m., it's going to be already the next day GMT. What else you need to submit to qualify in Canadian experience class? If you are working in Canada, you need a valid temporary resident status to work during this qualifying period. So it means that the work will have to be performed on a work permit, on a valid work permit, and implied, or as they say now, maintained status is valid. So let's say you graduate and you submit the application for postgraduate work permit and you start working because, as you know, you're allowed. And then the government drags and drags and drags, and only after 6 months you get your work permit. So your start of your authorized work period does not start with your postgraduate work permit. It starts at the day where you submitted your postgraduate work permit application and you started working. So you're considered unemployed maintained status, and this status is valid to count your qualified experience, work experience, for the purpose of Canadian experience class. Again, it must be allowed. What happens sometimes, it's just students do not apply for postgraduate work permit on time, but continue working. It means they're in violation of terms and conditions. Their experience was acquired while not authorized. Not only you cannot count it, but because you are in violation of terms and conditions of your work permit, this may make you inadmissible. So sometimes when it's an honest mistake and it's a several day, and if you ask and beg immigration, showing that it was not the fault of your own, that you were confused, that again, before the pandemic, sometimes, and during the first stages of pandemic, it might have worked. Now, because colleges and universities, and especially Hanson and Cambrian, they try to make sure that you know all the peculiarities of your temporary resident status, that you don't violate anything. They organize the seminars like this, and thank you for that. And you have to stay aware. And before you submit everything, before you say anything or think that you qualify in anything, go to Immigration Canada website. And this is canada.ca, and then you go to immigration, or it's cic.gc.ca, and check what are the latest news, because as I said, immigration is fluid and every week there is something new. Last but not least, employment conditions. So work experience gained as a student does not count for Canadian experience class. So it doesn't matter if you worked all allowable 20 hours during all your period of study. This experience will probably get you a better position after you graduate, but it will not qualify you for Canadian experience class. Only after you graduate, after you complete your studies and you start working, this experience counts. And self-employed work in Canada does not count. So if you try to work for an employer who says, oh, I don't have a payroll for you, you have to register your business and I will pay you checks. No, either you negotiate to be on payroll or you change and look for a different employer. Because if you registered as a self-employed individual or you register your own business, experience gained while working for this business or while working as self-employed does not count for Canadian experience class. And you have to know that. Okay, did you know the facts that education is not an eligibility requirement for Canadian experience class? I mean, we all want you to graduate, but for example, if you get a job offer, which is again not an eligibility requirement, and you receive LMIA, the employer says that, well, we have a labor market opinion impact assessment from Service Canada, and we're hiring you as a foreign worker, and it's an OCB occupation, ta-da. Well, yes, you may qualify. But again, it's not recommended because it's a very long and convoluted process and there are very many pitfalls. So please do graduate, get your postgraduate work permits and start working and knock 0A or B occupation. The employment requirements listed in NOC occupational description are not applicable. And the best, I think, is settlement funds is not an eligibility requirement for CEC. So it means that when you are creating your profile and the system asks you how many funds, what money are you going to bring with you to Canada? And if you put 0, you still qualify. Applicant does not need to be in Canada when they apply. This can seem a little bit confusing, but then again, there are situations where your work permit ran out, you got your 1 year or more, and obviously necessary hours to qualify, and then you cannot extend your work permit. So if you don't switch your status to visitor and wait for invitation, you can leave Canada and wait until you get drawn from your home country. If this happens, then absence of any temporary residence document is not will not ban you from being selected and from receiving a permanent residence visa. And if you are married or have a common law partner, none of their work or education impacts your eligibility in CSE principal applicants. When are you not eligible for the CSE? You're not eligible for the Canadian Experience class if you are a refugee claimant in Canada. Sometimes refugee claimants are allowed to study. They get study permits, but if you look at this type of study permits, you see it in terms and conditions below, it says this does not confer status. It means that you cannot use this work experience for CSE, and you can graduate, you can get an education credential, but your work experience will not qualify you for Canadian Experience class. Again, I already mentioned, if you're working without authorization, you have to be very careful. You're not eligible for the CSE because you are in violation of terms and conditions of your current temporary residence status document. And if your work experience was gained without temporary residence status in Canada, again, because either you are a refugee or you worked without a work permit where you were not allowed to be so, then no, you cannot use this work experience, and you are not even eligible to enter the pool in CSE. So general points to remember: your language tests, if it's English, it's only IELTS general training, not academic, the one you took for studies, it has to be general. Or CELPIP, also general. Or if you speak fluent French, it's TEF or TCF. Don't take the shortcuts for French, don't take the Quebec, because it's valid only for Quebec. Take TEF or TCF. So the results must be still valid. Normally they valid for 2 years since the report is produced. If the test expires while you are in the pool, you will be thrown out of the pool. So make sure you remember, you put a little flag on your calendar. If your test results are going to be expiring soon, book a new exam and update your profile, because otherwise you will be thrown out and you will have to start anew. And if it happens that the pass mark will be exactly at the one that you have, for example, for 70, and you have for 70, then if there is more applicants in the pool than the quota, then the candidates will be selected by the date they enter the pool. So the ones whose profiles are in the system for a longer time will be selected. And if you just created your profile yesterday, then you might not be, though you have the same points. Again, Canadian Experience class never requirement settlement funds. This is a good thing. You do not need to maintain temporary resident status after 1 year if you are not present in Canada. And again, presence in Canada is not an eliminatory requirement. On the other hand, if you are in Canada or on a labor market impact assessment for work, you need to maintain your temporary resident status and work in Canada in order to get the points for arranged employment. So we will speak a little bit later how to increase your score, how to increase your points in the system. But last but not least, if you have education from your home country before you started your studies here, you better go and do your ECA educational credential assessment with a designated organization. ECA report will give you more points in the system, more CRA points, hopefully. They're valid for 5 years. So when you are ordering the ECA report, you have an option to select it for immigration purposes, for study purposes. You have to select it only for immigration purposes, because when you select it for immigration purposes, then the organization makes it available through their shared computer system with Immigration Canada, and they can verify it without actually asking you to produce the original results. So today we're focusing on Canadian Experience class, and here is an example how to calculate your qualifying time of work. So let's say if the worker works 1 year part-time, 10 hours per week, and another 6 months full-time, 30 hours or more, will it count as 1 year for Canadian Experience class? So let's calculate. You worked for 1 year, 52 weeks for 10 hours, for example, as a food service supervisor. So it's 10 hours times 52, 520 hours. And then you worked 6 months full-time as a developer on a contract. So it's 30 hours, 780. So when you combine them, the total will be 1300. It's less than 1560. So if you are still working, you have to continue working, though it's over 12 months. So you hit this magic 1560 number. Again, it may be in different occupations, doesn't matter, as long as you accumulate this 1 year and 1560 hours. For Canadian work experience class, if a work permit holder is forced to work outside Canada due to COVID, will that still be considered as Canadian experience class or federal skilled worker experience? So bad news for you guys, those who are working for Canadian employers, you can only count the experience gained while physically in Canada for the Canadian work experience, for the Canadian experience class. If you're working outside Canada, even you're working for a Canadian employer, this can be only considered for federal skilled worker program. If a person studied or worked in Quebec but intends to reside in Toronto, does he or she qualify for Canadian experience class? Interesting question, but yes, you can apply and count your Quebec experience. So let's say if you get your 6-month stint to work as a developer for some Quebec City company and you were forced to move, or even if you worked remotely by sitting in Brampton and working for a company in Quebec, then yes, you still qualify and this experience can be counted. Now, what you need to prove that you intend to reside in Toronto or GTA or the rest of Canada, not in Quebec, in order to qualify for Canadian experience class. And for that, you will have to write a detailed explanation showing how you intend to do that. Obviously, if you don't know a single word of spoken or written French, that would be a factor in your favor, but this is not enough. Question. I have been working full-time in Canada in NOGB occupation for over a year with a postgraduate work permit, but I did not receive the prevailing wage. The prevailing wage, it's important when you are offered, when you are given a job offer under the Labor Market Impact Assessment, LMIA, because it determines if the employer is qualified even to give you this job offer. But if you are working as a graduate, as a recent graduate, the prevailing wage is not a requirement. Obviously, when a Canadian employer hires a young graduate with no Canadian experience, with no experience at all, they are not going to pay you handsome salary right away. They want to put you first on probation. Maybe you're not good for the job, who knows? They don't know you and you don't have references. So sometimes you get minimal salary where the work actually merits more. So hopefully after a couple of months of probation period, you get more. But again, even if the work was skilled, but was not paid as such, this work period would still qualify. Obviously, the common sense is applicable. Let's say if you are bringing the reference letter that you worked as a unit manager and you're paid minimal work, $15 or $15 an hour, then the officer will 100% scrutinize your application more and will look at your pay stubs, look at your reference, maybe even call your employer or send you a procedural fairness letter when they have doubts that the document that you submitted is authentic. To make sure it's not fraudulent, they will start a verification process and send you a letter which you will have to explain. So that, again, the factor, can you do the job? So when IRCC officer looks at your application documents, they must be convinced that you are capable of doing your job. It means that your education and training will be taken into consideration, your background and prior work experience, if you have it, to determine if you meet the requirement of the job. And if they have any concerns, again, you will get a PFL letter, procedural fairness letter. You're normally given 30 or 60 days to provide explanations, to provide additional documents, to prove that you are who you are and you work at the position that you are saying you're working. And if the officer is not satisfied, your application may be refused. If a work permit holder is forced to work outside Canada, okay, that we already covered. Will in Canada self-employed work of my spouse be counted for comprehensive ranking system? No, self-employed work, either of you or your spouse or partner will not qualify for Canadian work experience. And again, it relates to both you, principal applicant, and spouse. So only employment when you are working on a payroll of a Canadian company qualifies for both you and your spouse for Canadian experience class. Okay, now we're going to comprehensive ranking system. So what is the comprehensive ranking system? This is the system to select the candidates from the pool. So for each factor, contributable point factor, you are given some points. So this is the category of core human capital factors. So you were gauged by age, level of education, official language proficiency, and Canadian work experience. You're given points for each of them. If you go to this link, you will have the general number of points and all the factors that are written here, like in more detail. And then when you scroll down, you will have the actually the breakdown of points completely, and that's how you calculate your points. You're not using your tool. I recommend doing it manually because it's more accurate, because sometimes the system doesn't know you. It's called artificial intelligence, but it's just whatever you input there, the algorithm gives you the answer. So if you make a mistake, then it won't be correct. So if you bookmark this page and just familiarize yourself with it, it will help you in the long run to enter your details correctly in the system. Now, the category of accompanying spouse of common law partner, if you have him or her, it's his or her level of education, official language proficiency, and also if they have Canadian work experience. Next on the factors are the category of skill transferability factors. So it's the combination of education, official language proficiency, combination of your education level and Canadian work experience, combination of foreign work experience and official language proficiency for those who have foreign work experience, and the combination of Canadian work experience and foreign work experience. It's as clear as mud at first, and it's not very pleasant that you cannot score. You cannot score top score at each of these categories and count them all together as a sum. The maximum points for these two combined categories are only 100. Again, the combination of a certificate of qualification, it gives you a little bit more, but for you, certificate of qualification mostly not applicable, because certificate of qualification applies only to federal skilled trades program. If you are in the trades and if you have a red seal, for example, as a carpenter or as a roofer, in rare examples, if you did this in your foreign country, you have all the documents and you try to evaluate and confirm your trade qualification in Canada or in Ontario, you get a certificate of qualification, you get extra points for that. Otherwise, no. The fact that you have, for example, CPA, Chartered Accountant designation, or certificate as a sales professional does not automatically serve as certificate of qualification. It's only for the skilled trades occupations. And the last category is additional factors. So what counts is provincial nomination. If you are nominated by the province, it gives you 600 extra points. It means that if you are even hovering at like less than 300 points and 600 points is added, the golden key to the permanent resident visa is in your pocket. Qualifying offer of arranged employment. I will talk more about it. It's mostly we are talking about LMIA job offer. It means the employer will have to get permission from Service Canada, from ESDC, to hire a foreign worker and offer you the job. You have to be able to do the job. Remember what we covered earlier, the ability to do the job. And you get a work permit, you extend your work permit, you get an employer-specific work permit. You can work only for this employer and only for this occupation. In this case, under these circumstances, when you get an offer from this employer, it will count for 50 extra points for your CRS points. Canadian education credentials. Obviously, you will have a Canadian education credential when you graduate. If it's 1 year or 2 years, you will get extra 15 points. If it's a 3-year degree or diploma, it's 30 points. If you have a sibling in Canada, you get extra points. And if you are proficient in French, Lowest would be CLB 7 if your first language is French, or if you happen to know or learn French and you're already near this CLB or an CLC in French proficiency, then keep learning it. It will give you, it will boost your, it may boost your points significantly. And if we have time to talk about Ontario Nominee program, there is a French speaking stream. If you're in Canada and if your main language is French, and if you also speak and can demonstrate English proficiency, then you will qualify in the Francophone stream of Ontario PNP program. And there is a high chance you can get this extra coveted 600 points to get you to the top of the pool in Express Entry. So the total number of points is 1,200. I've never seen anyone reach this 1,200, but because normally the points are hovering between 400, around 470, but sometimes they drop to much lower. So don't get despaired if you have only 430, 420. As I said, on February 13th, the points dropped to 75. So don't lose any hope. Try to increase your points and keep working, keep looking for other ways to increase your points. So how do you increase your points? So it could be through education. If you have an education from your home country, it is not a requirement to have it assessed, but if you do have an education credential, do please have it assessed with one of the designated TC organizations. There are several of them. WES, WES, the third in the list, is the fastest one so far. And if it is a university, chances are you will get a good, like decent evaluation, assessing it as a 3-year credential. 3-year credential plus 1 year, even 1 year Canadian credential will give you almost maximal points for education. So please never neglect to have it evaluated. You get 15 extra points again for your post-secondary program in Canada. Again, if you're going for ECA, if you have only high school diploma from your home country, you don't need to have it evaluated. You won't get any points for that. And one thing to remember, if you studied for a credential outside Canada for longer than 50% of the program duration, which is now allowed in wake of COVID pandemic all over the globe, you will still be eligible for the postgraduate work permit, but you will not get CRS points for Canadian education. So those of you who are past your first semester and are thinking about the rest, please do come to Canada, because in order to get a Canadian education credential points, in order to get this 15 coveted points for Canadian credential, you need to be at least for 50% of your education time in Canada. This is very important. Work experience. How I can get points? This is actually an interesting question. How can we count points for foreign work experience if you never worked in your home country? What if you don't have education in this occupation? So this slide, read it please, and I will try to explain it. Remember, we were talking that work during your studies is not qualifying. It will not count for Canadian experience class, but in some cases, under some conditions, it may qualify you for federal skilled workers. So if, let's say, you are taking a 2-year diploma program, and throughout the whole duration of this 2 years, you were working part-time. So you found, for example, some night supervisor position, or you are a team lead, which gives you a NOC-B occupation code. And you're working 15, 20 hours a week, which is allowed during your studies. You're paying your bills, you're happy, you're a little bit tired, but you continuously have been working so that you accumulated at least 30 hours in total. It means 1,560 hours of work. So it's like if you work in 15 hours a week, it would be the necessary hours would be probably, would be during 2 years. It may be a little bit more, it may be a little bit less, but if it's a continuous, again, experience, this may qualify you for the foreign work experience in the CRS grid. So it means that right after graduation, you can create your profile and apply, and you will qualify under federal skilled workers. Again, not sure if this will serve you well during the pandemic, because as I said, so far only two draws during the previous 12 months were for federal skilled workers. The rest was for either PNP or Canadian Experience class. But again, this experience may qualify you under federal skilled workers, and you get ahead in your CRS points. When you go to this link I mentioned earlier, you will see how the points are allocated. I'm not sure we have time today for that. You can do it on your own. You will have either way to demonstrate performance of all duties from the NOC lead statement and the majority of other duties listed in the NOC description. So example of such jobs that would qualify you when you don't have any experience or prior experience or education is administrative assistant, is food service supervisor. If you're working a food service supervisor, you have to demonstrate your work history for the continuity, because in order to satisfy the immigration officer that you are able to do the job, normally you are not hired out of the blue without any experience as a food service supervisor. You get a food server, for example, or a hostess job, and you get promoted because you demonstrate certain qualities which are indispensable for this NOC. Okay, if your CRS score is really low and you can get your language ahead, then job offer may help you. You will need your employer who offering you this job offer will need an LMIA in 99% of the cases. Sometimes this job offer or arranged employment points in the CRS grid could be LMIA exempt. So LMIA exempt, it's only when you are given a job offer and you're a citizen of Mexico, which would fall under the old NAFTA and now CUSMA, so under the free trade agreements, or you're a citizen of Chile, or what was the other one, the Peru, or for some European countries in certain occupations you qualify under the free trade agreements. It's very rare again, but again, if you're a citizen of this country, you cannot discount this opportunity. And the LMIA, which has to be valid, you get a job offer. This will also give you 50 points in two cases. If you're already working on LMIA-based work permit, so in this case, LMIA may already be past its validity date on the paper. Or if you are working on your postgraduate work permit and your employer is so impressed that he decides to submit an LMI application to support your permanent residence, this is also allowed. Then if you have this LMIA, then it has to be valid while you're applying, while you are selected, and while the permanent residence visa is issued. So these days, because of COVID, LMIAs are issued for 9 months. Normally it's 6 months. So it means you have to really plan and time your application process. So how the job offer has to be qualifying for 50 extra points. So this job offer has to be made by one employer. The job and the offer has to be continuous, paid full-time for at least 30 hours per week. It must not be seasonal. Its duration has to be for at least 1 year after a permanent resident visa is issued. So it means that the job offer has to be for at least 2 years, because processing sometimes takes 1 year or more. If you remember, we were talking about the processing times, and that IRCC said that we intend to process 80% of these applications in 6 months or less, or around this time. But if your application is not within this 80%, then you really have to think about timing. The job that you're offered has to be a NOC skilled job, 0, A or B NOC. It has to be made by an employer with a new positive LMIA that approves the offer and names you and your position. The other way is if you're already working in Canada in NOC 0A or B on an LMIA-based work permit, and you're working for an employer listed on your work permit, You are authorized to work in Canada when you apply, and you're authorized to work in Canada when the visa is issued. So if, let's say, if you've been working on LMIA and your work permit is expiring, then even if you get an ITA, if you don't submit your application while your LMIA and work permit are still valid, then you won't get these points. You have to be authorized to work in Canada. Your current employer has to be making you the offer to give you a full-time job for at least 1 year if you're accepted as a permanent resident. So there is a certain sample how this job offer has to be written, and it has to be complied with. Now, last but not least would be language points. So minimum is CLB 7 in each ability. So it is 7 if you in each ability if you pass CELPIP test, and in IELTS it has to be 7 in reading, writing, and speaking, and it have to be 8 in listening. Again, it has to be IELTS general. If it is, this will qualify you for CLB 9. So for CLB 7, it's IELTS 6 in each band. CLB 9, it's 7 and listening and 8. Always aim at a higher ability, because even if it drops a little bit, it goes immediately under the lower. And for combined CRS points, your score drops dramatically. So if you get to CLB 9, not only will you get more points for language, but you will also get additional points under skill transferability factors. When you combine your education and work experience in Canada with your higher CLB, you will get automatically more points. Again, fluency in French will give you 25 additional points if you can score CLB 7 or higher in TEF or TCF tests. And if at the same time you can add English results, at least at CLB 5 each band, then your extra points are going until 50. So let's say if you have a moderate or average French ability, it would be worse for you while you're on a work permit to continue increasing your French proficiency and try to pass your TEF or TCF test at the CLB 7 level, because it will hike your score at 50 and you will not need an LMIA. Family in Canada gives you points when it's a sibling. It's not aunt, uncle, or a parent, it's a sibling. Sibling in Canada gets you 15 additional points, but the sibling has to be a permanent resident or a Canadian citizen who will have to reside in Canada. So if you have a sibling who is a citizen in Canada who took a job, for example, with Google and working in Seattle full time, then no, you cannot count him or as your sibling for the purpose of points, because he's not residing in Canada. But if he is, then yes, it will be extra 15 points. If you have a spouse or common law partner with high language skills, master's or PhD degree in Canadian skilled work experience, and yes, it would be worthwhile to count the spouse's point, because this will also increase your points. Again, if you have a spouse with no language, no education, no Canadian skilled work experience, then you have an option to declare the spouse if the spouse resides outside Canada and non-accompanying family member. This the trick often resorted to in this case, because if the spouse is non-accompanying, you go into the pool as a single applicant. So the points will be calculated for single applicants. But then the spouse will still have to be examined. It means for the future, when you will be sponsoring your spouse to Canada, you will need to have your spouse pass the criminal and medical admissibility test. So the spouse will have to go through the medical at the time of your immigration and bring the non-criminal record certificates in order to show that they're not inadmissible to Canada. Because if your spouse, a partner, is inadmissible, then you're also inadmissible to Canada. Always assess a highly scoring spouse, a partner as well, because maybe they're a better principal applicant than you are. Run both your scores and see who scores better. And very important, you can enter your both profiles in Experience Entry System. If you both qualify, then you can have two profiles. And then it may, in a rare case scenario, it may happen that you both receive invitations to apply? Well, in this case, you have a lucky draw, and then you will decide which application to pursue and which to decline. It's very important to know that misrepresentation, so what it is, it's when you are omitting a fact, or you are making an incorrect statement which is not truthful, or you're withholding a document or producing a document which is not true, which can be constituted as fraudulent, whether it's deliberate or inadvertent, or it's not your fault or by oversight, it can potentially lead an officer to make a decision saying that it's a material misrepresentation and you would get benefit under the act, and this could bar you for 5 years from any application from Canada. So remember that if you're making an honest mistake on a profile, the profile is not considered an application. We talked about it, and it's not a misrepresentation. Misrepresentation occurs only at the stage of when you received an ITA and submitting your application for permanent residence. So any application costs money to submit. If you make a mistake and it's rejected, well, that's a best case scenario because you're not going to get charged. But you will lose time because it may sit there for 6 months before the first stage review is made, and then they will return the applications to you, and it's not nice because you lost 6 months and your work permit might be expiring. And then again, if it's considered a misrepresentation, not an honest mistake, it can be a potential bar from any kind of application to Canada. You won't be able to extend your work permit. You won't be able to go and study. You won't be able to submit any application. And if your spouse qualifies on his own, then the spouse will be inadmissible because you are inadmissible. Just don't. If you're thinking to submit a fraudulent document, don't even think about it, because everything is being scrutinized and everything is being verified. There are ways that you cannot even imagine how, especially it is related to your prior refusals. For example, you applied 10 years ago, you applied for a visitor visa to the States through some travel agency, and the travel agency told you, oh, you've been refused. You didn't get any information other than that. You don't get any paper, but the word that you are refused has to ring a bell. So when you submit an application, there is a statutory question that asks, have you ever been refused? And the first word is Canada. So if you're not reading further and you tick no, thinking about Canada because you've never been refused any status, any visa to Canada, and you tick you've not, but you were, because in the states and 5 other countries have joint computer system with Canada. So it's automatically verified. And if it's found that you lied on this question, that it is an automatical misrepresentation. Please be very, very careful. And if you applied through an agent, especially if the agent is not authorized to provide immigration advice in Canada, then please double check, verify, because when you submit your application, it's already too late. It is a misrepresentation. Okay, so the documents that you need for Canadian Experience class. First of all, you need documents when you create your profile, which is your passport, your language test results, your education credential assessment report, proof of work experience, if you have a written job offer, and if you have a provincial nomination. Why? Because you will need to enter numbers and data from these documents. Now on stage 2, when you receive an invitation to apply ITA, you will need to submit documents for your application for permanent residence. And in addition to the ones that are listed on this little cube on the left, you will need police certificates from each country where you resided since you turned 18 for more than 6 months, for 6 months or more. You will need your upfront medical exam. So if you know you will have your 1 year work in Canada in a month or 2 months, and you plan to create your profile, please go and book your medical examination, because of COVID and delays, some offices may not accommodate you within the next couple of weeks or so, and you may have to wait for the whole month. And if you want to create and submit your profile as soon as possible, then you need to have the upfront medical. Birth certificate you need only if you have your claiming dependent children on your application. And claiming, it means you have dependent children. You cannot omit a child from the application because it would be misrepresentation. If you're married, you need a marriage certificate. If you are living common law, you will need a common law partner declaration and other proofs. If you use a representative, you use user representative forms, IMM 5476. If you have been divorced, then you need a divorce certificate and legal separation agreement. If you're separated, you need a separation agreement, or if you been living together as a couple less than a year and then separated, then you don't need anything. If you're declared your marital status as widowed, you need a death certificate of your spouse. May their soul rest in peace. And if your dependent child is listed as adopted, you will need adoption certificate for your child. These are the statutory documents that you absolutely have to submit and to provide. The other documents included in your personal document checklist, which is generated after you complete all the information forms and click submit. This would be a proof of relationship to a relative in Canada, digital photos according to specifications to confirm your identity. If you have other name to confirm aliases, then you will need the document to show that you have a different spelling or a different type of name. Authority to release personal information on designated individual. For example, if your spouse is overseas and the spouse gives you this kind of document and any other document that you feel are relevant to your application. So this kind of documents, when you are creating your document checklist, please tick my favorite, which is called so-called client information, which client information is considered to be an optional document, but it's highly recommended. The client information slot, it adds important information not mentioned on the checklist. It can serve for explanatory letter. For example, if your family situation or if your name situation is convoluted or you cannot provide some kind of a document and you have a reasonable explanation for this, you submit it in this client information slot. If you have documents that don't fit by size in other slot, for example, if you want to claim points for federal skilled worker application and you're selected in federal skilled workers applications, you will need to provide a proof of financial sufficiency. So in this case, you will have to combine all the assets into one document under 4 megabytes. Sometimes it's not fit in there, so you just write that the rest of the documents are provided in client information slot and upload them there. Some documents do not have a designated slot in the first place, so if you don't know where the document fits, write an explanatory letter and submit it and upload it in the client information slot. And again, if it's an explanatory letter, it has to be written in a form of a letter which is addressed to IRCC Dear Officer or Dear ICC, or please be advised that. So this is a sample how the document checklist looks like. So it shows like document checklist. I normally take a printout of this checklist, send it to the client for approval and verification before I submit their application, before we start gathering the documents. So it's passports, photo, police certificate, educational certificates. If you have ECA, it has to be uploaded with the education diplomas and degrees, employment records for your current position, employment records for your previous positions, use of representative forms if you are represented, proof of means of financial support, again, if it's federal skilled workers or PNP and not Canadian experience class. Yes, important to know. If you are selected under Canadian experience class CEC, you don't need any proof of funds. But if you get a provincial nominee certificate, if the province selects you from CEC applicants from CEC pool, and you get a nomination certificate, in order to qualify for provincial nomination, when you are submitting documents for provincial nomination, you will need proof of means of financial support. You will need to demonstrate it. Any PNP, it's off the top of my head, I don't even think of one where financial sufficiency is not required. It is. And your digital photo, optional documents, client information, submission letter, and ITA you may attach here. You pay permanent residence application fee, which is $825 these days, and biometrics fee for permanent residence. Now, until the end of June, those who applied in CEC and who used to have biometrics done for temporary resident status are exempt. But please, after July 1st, check the criteria. It may be reinstated. So again, the process flow in this little chart. So first you have to ensure all the documents are updated. You have all police certificates, you have work experience letter, you have your ECA if you need it, you have language tests, you ensure they're up to date on the stage where you're creating your profile, you're updating your profile. Medical must be done up front. Well, medicals, I recommend to don't do your medicals when you're just creating your profile. Do it when you receive your invitation to apply. Check letters of present and past employment. There is a very strict guideline how these letters have to be written. They absolutely have to be on a letterhead. The letterhead must contain full contact information of the employer with phone, fax if they have fax, full address with postal code, and email address and website if they have it. The dates of employment, your start of work, your title, your duties. The duties have to match NOC of the occupation you're claiming to perform. The name, your name, and the name of position of the signatory. Whoever signs, it's human resources or general manager or your immediate supervisor. The name has to be there and the position has to be there, and obviously the signature of this person has to be there as well. Ensure you upload everything under the correct slot. I cannot stress enough how important it is to check when you're saving the documents. By the way, each document that you save for future uploads, make sure that you actually put the name of the document in the name. So employment letter from, for example, from Cisco, or employment letter from ABC company. Because if you're uploading a document in the wrong slot or you upload the wrong document, then it may result in the rejection of your application and you will lose valuable time. Or if it's a statutory document, then the application may be refused for non-compliance. So the express entry profile, when it's in the pool, has to be constantly updated. If something changes, if you separate it, if you got married, it has to be updated. Don't wait until you receive ITA, because when you receive ITA on this date, on this very moment, your profile is frozen. You cannot make any changes. You can only submit explanations, which can be taken or not taken at face value by the officer. Remember that the profile is valid for 1 year or until language tests result expire. So if you see that your IELTS or CELPAPE expiring soon, go and have another one and update your profile with a new number of report. Once ITA is received, log into my CIC account and continue the application. And when the information is updated, you submit all the information which will be displayed by the sections. Upload the document. Your personalized document checklist will be generated and the document will be uploaded. After you submit your electronic application for permanent residence within 60 days from receiving ITA, you wait for the confirmation. You wait for the confirmation, and then very important, remember that the portal functions on GMT time zone, so don't wait until the last day. And if your work permit is expiring soon, less than 4 months after you submitted your application, then the letter of acknowledgement with your file number will serve as eligibility criteria to submit your bridging open work permit application. So if you submitted your application for permanent residence, say today on June 30th, and on July 2nd your work permit expires, immediately get your acknowledgement of receipt with your file number that your application is submitted, and either today or tomorrow submit your application to extend your work permit, because then you will be on implied status and you can continue working on this implied or maintained status, continue working in Canada. If you don't do this, then you will have to convert your work permit to visitor record, and you will have either to leave Canada and wait until your application is processed and you get PR, or convert into visitor and wait in Canada, but you won't be able to work. So again, timing is very important. Okay, I think we went a little bit over time. We don't have much for the Ontario nominee program. The only thing that I can say that for any provincial nominee program, uh, most of the streams are employer centered. It means that you can submit an application only if you are in express entry and you get a letter of interest from the province that you are selected from their express entry stream and saying, well, we selected you for express entry stream of, let's say, Ontario, or sometimes a different province, you never know. Maybe your profile fits their requirements, and you are asking to submit your application to signal if you are interested, you have to submit your application, for example, within 14 days. So if you review and you see that you have all your documents and you can submit your application within 14 days, go for it. Again, if you are submitting it under Ontario PNP, in all the streams, you have to demonstrate that you have enough funds. You go to the Federal Skilled Workers, Google funds required to immigrate to Canada, go to Canada Immigration website and check funds for the number of family members are updated every January. So what was good for last year might not be necessarily good for this year. Make sure that you have all these funds. Your both spouse and you can pool funds together. This is allowed. And obviously the PNP requires additional fees to be paid. So see how many points you have, see like if you have to gauge the interest, if you have to pay and submit and qualify under PNP or in express entry and get the coveted 600 points, or you think that within, for example, 5-6 months, you can get an invitation to apply because the point will drop, or you will submit another document, or you will have now 2 years of Canadian work experience, another one, and your points will grow. So look for yourself. It's quite a complex system, but it's reasonable to have it, to navigate it on your own. And if you don't, remember that you can always Canadian immigration professional to turn to, if not to provide full services on your application, at least for a consultation, because the only bad question is the one that is not asked. And in such a complex system as immigration and your future in Canada, you cannot afford to make any mistakes. Make sure that whoever represents you are fully authorized. So these are the links. If the person is claiming to be an immigration consultant, the name has to be entered here. Find a professional, the name has to be authorized. If the name claiming to be a lawyer, it has to be a Canadian lawyer. In Ontario, for example, you go to LSO, Law Society of Ontario.ca, and you check if the person's name is there. And again, if it's a lawyer, make sure that it's an immigration lawyer, it's not traffic tickets or personal injury lawyer, because they have as much knowledge in the immigration system as your average Indian agent. I'm sorry to say that. There are good lawyers, and then they're not so good ones. The same as consultants, ICCRC members. Some of them are better than the others, let's put it this way. And again, if you have any questions, you can always go to student services and book a consultation. Or if you have any questions for your future immigration process as a permanent resident, you can write to me directly. This is my email address.
All right.
And I'm sorry we went a little bit over time, but I really wanted to cover everything, so there's as less questions as possible. I can stay as much as is needed for questions, because
yes, sounds good. Yeah, really apologize, everyone. We're running a little bit out of time, but we will save the Ontario nomination program for the next session. Let's try to go through all of the questions. I will read them out to you, Julia. So we have a question from anonymous attendee. Can a student do part-time job in co-op semester?
so your co-op semester is considered studies. So wherever your placement is, if you are keeping doing a part-time job, it has to be 20 hours or less. Yes, of course you can.
Okay.
Because it's
perfect.
considered to be a normal study period.
All right, we have another question from Ajay Paul. I hope I read it right. If you please let me know if my online learning 1 year program will be counted as Canadian study and will be given points in CEC under Express Entry. I won't be taking on another course. This course is entirely online.
Okay, if you are in Canada, then yes. If you're out of Canada, then no. It won't be given 15 points. That we covered, actually.
Yeah, we have covered it. Perfect. So another question from Harkirat.
Oh,
Um,
that's to you guys.
Oh yeah, okay. So if you want to travel to Canada in September, because we don't know if the travel ban will be lifted, but right now because of the travel ban is still effective, we have stopped giving out the travel support letter, and we will resume issuing the travel support letter once the travel ban has been lifted. Um, Another question from anonymous attendee. As it is mentioned here, the total hours should be 1560 hours in total. So how they calculate or take in account the number of hours per week? So far, I have heard they count only 30 hours for 40 hours of work. Please solve this confusion.
That's correct. So even if you work 60 hours per week, only 30 hours will be counted because 30 hours in Canada is considered to be full time.
Okay,
So on the other hand, if you're working part-time only for 15 hours, it means that you will have to work double number of weeks with 15 hours. So generally, if you go strictly by the book, you take a number of weeks with the number of hours and then you prorate.
perfect. The next question is, I live in Ontario, but if I got the job in other province instead of Ontario, oh,
Okay, this is a very good question, which I hoped to cover in the PNPs, for which we have no time. So maybe, you know what, I'll promise you another session. Even if it's for half an hour, I can do it maybe later. So what's happening? In Ontario, again, as I said, everything, most of the streams are employer-centered, except the stream which is express entry stream. It means that employer gives you an offer and then you and employer combined submit the employer on their side and you on this and submit documents to qualify in the stream. So what happens is you can get qualified in other province. Sometimes it's even maybe easier. Why? Because in Ontario, in order to give you a job offer, the employer has to give you a job offer in two categories only, two streams. One stream would be a recent graduate, and the other stream would be the foreign worker. So if you have a 3-year postgraduate work permit, only the first 2 years qualify for the stream which is for recent graduates. It means that if the employer is giving you the offer as an international graduate, it means within 2 years from your graduation, they can keep you on minimal salary and the application will still be approved. If you are considered a foreign worker, if it's your 3rd year, they cannot use this stream. They can use only foreign worker stream. And in this case, they have to pay you prevailing wages for the occupation. For example, if you're a graphic designer, they cannot pay you $20. It has to be $29.75, for example. That's one thing. The other thing is the employer qualified to give you a job offer. If the employer is in GTA, the overall revenue for the year has to be at least $1 million. So if it's a small mom and pop shop, printing shop, then they may want to give you a job offer, but they don't qualify for that. Again, if it's a company which is outside the Greater Toronto area, the revenue threshold is $500,000. In other provinces, they don't have it. For example, I was asked many times about Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. They have different streams and they have similar streams. Job offer, for example, if you have worked in Nova Scotia for 1 year, then the employer can submit, you and employer can submit a joint application. Everything is done online as in Ontario right now. The employer does not have a threshold. So even if employer does not have any revenue and they're paying you out of pocket because you're working on some kind of a cool application that will score them billions of dollars in the future, they still are allowed to submit this application and you still qualify well, providing that you qualify for other factors. So yes, sometimes it's easier to do in other provinces, but please beware. I had several consultations where students were enticed by unscrupulous agents who are not even licensed to provide immigration advice to move to Nova Scotia to work for trucking companies. Now, the company has to have a status in the province and to file their taxes and to have establishment in the province for different provinces, at least 1 or 2 years, sometimes 3. Different provinces have different threshold. If it's a new company, they cannot give you a job offer. You won't qualify under the provincial nominee program of that province. So it's very, very important when you get a job offer from that province or you are being hired to do your due diligence and check how long the company has been operating in the province. Or for example, if the province is opening a branch there and shifting you there to do the operations, again, the branch is new, so they are not qualified to submit you under the, for example, Nova Scotia provincial nominee stream.
Okay, thank you, Julia. So the next question is, I applied for TR to PR pathway for non-health essential worker stream. I'm on student visa. I have my IELTS results. I have worked in required NOC and I have accumulated 1,560 hours in the last 14 months. Do I qualify for the stream or having a
If you
work?
are still a student, well, we are talking about TR to PR or we are talking about CEC. For CEC, you will need the experience gained while being a student does not count. But TR to PR, there is a completely different program. It's a pilot. So if you are qualified within the program and you submitted the application, then yes, you qualify. The fact is that it opened on May 6th and within a day, the first 40,000 quota was gone. So none of these people, from what I know, have received even acknowledgement of receipt. So it's going to be a long process. But yes, if they qualified, then you have nothing to worry about. Again, for Canadian experience class, you need to start accumulating your experience after you graduate.
Okay. The next question from our vendor: how much time it take to final result after express entry draw?
Usually it's within 24 hours. So let's say if the draw is in the morning, by next morning you should receive an ITA. If you cannot find an ITA, look in your spam. The government communicates with you from no reply account, which automatically relegated to spam folders in many email servers. So go there. If you have an email that there is a message in your account, go to your account and check your application. It will be showing your application, which is started, but there's not going to be an ITA. Go back to your profile, go down. There should be 2 lines, one line with your profile and one line with your application, which says application started.
Okay, the next question from Elizabeth: should I prepare submit the profile myself, or by an immigration agent? Any plus point or favor if I submit the profile through an agent?
Uh, okay, that depends on many factors. First is how comfortable you are. If you're comfortable to submit it on your own, just have it in a very organized manner. Make sure that all the documents are laid out. You have all the numbers. Because let's say if you get confused afterwards for an immigration professional, like for me, for example, it's much easier to start it from scratch than to start verifying the information that you entered. Example, I had a client who had their own profile, and then they got an ITA and they couldn't even find it. So they they first got me for the consultation and they asked me to proceed with their application, and it turns out that the IELTS number was entered completely incorrectly. So I don't know where this number was taken from. So when I was going through the profile, it took me almost as much time to get through the profile and correct the mistakes than to submit the application. So I don't know. It's up to you. It's up to you. And again, the very important thing, if you decide to resort to the services of immigration professional, make sure the person is licensed to provide immigration advice and they're experienced in this type of application. So if, let's say, there are some of my colleagues, they're doing only refugees. If you ask them anything about express entry, they would stare blankly. And the same as if someone asks me about refugees, I say, oops, no, I'm not doing that. So make sure they're doing that and they're authorized to provide the service, they're licensed.
Perfect. And the next question, also from Elizabeth, is IELTS 5 needed for NOC B? Is IELTS 6 needed for NOC 0 or A?
There is no such thing as, oh, you mean IELTS? IELTS
Right.
5 or
IELTS.
CLB? Okay, so for CLB 5, it's IELTS 5. For CLB 7, it's IELTS 6. I know it's confusing, but there it is. And for you have, your aim is CLB 9. CLB 9 is speaking, writing, reading at 7 and listening at 8. That's you get the highest point in the grid.
Perfect. The next question is from Glenn. When is the correct timing for submitting application for CEC and OINP? After graduating and gaining a valid job offer, can I apply for OINP right away or even no job offer? I can only apply for CEC after graduating and working with the required hours number of year. Is this correct? What if my post? Yeah, that is the first question.
Okay, so the correct timing, again, the first stage is not submit an application. The first stage is creating your profile. So once you have 1 year of work experience and IELTS general result that would qualify you, you can create your profile. If you have less than 1 year experience in Canadian experience, then you are not qualified for CEC. And after you get an invitation to apply, after your score matches the score of the draw, then you have 60 days to submit your application. Did I answer the question?
Okay. So this next question also from Glenn is, what if my post-graduation work permit expires and I still not applied for CEC or OINP? What will happen to my status? Will I be forced to leave? How can this be avoided?
And what does it mean in ITA? ITA, it's invitation to apply. So do not let your status expire. If you see that it's expiring, you have to, just three things may happen. So one is if it expires, you leave Canada. This case, your application may continue, or if you receive a draw, you still can submit it because it's online. You can do it from anywhere, even from the North Pole. The second is to try to get it extended either under the LMIA or under free trade agreement. Again, if you're from certain countries, try to find any other way to have it extended. And again, for that, I would recommend a consultation with a professional with your detailed information provided, because sometimes it's quite a complex situation. And also, if you're working for the employer who is willing to give you a job offer, then maybe you should do a joint consultation, because sometimes the employer is qualified, sometimes the employer is not. And it has to be really fast, because sometimes for if you're a national of Mexico, for example, and you're working as a technician, you can certain employers can submit an offer through their own employer portal, and you will not need LMIA for that. So it may take 2-3 days instead of at least more than a month for LMIA, because for LMIA you need to do mandatory advertising. For LMIA exempt job offer, you don't need mandatory advertising, so it can be done as fast as 3-4 days. So again, it depends on your individual situation. The other part of the question was, okay, and the last but not least, if you feel like you're going to be selected soon, you want to stay in Canada, before your postgraduate work permit expires, you have to apply to convert it to visitor status, to be on visitor record. So you take the 5708 form, IMM 5708, and you ask to stay in Canada as a visitor. You have to demonstrate that you have enough money there to sustain yourself.
Perfect. So the next question from Phoebe. I studied general business and completed a course in September. Can I use the 2 years of diploma to apply for work and PR? What preparations do I have sorry, what preparation do I have now? Besides, I am a Hong Kong citizen. Can I apply to a Hong Kong citizen?
Okay, for citizens of Hong Kong, there is pathway that was recently announced. So what you will need to do, this is for those who graduated. So you already graduated, right? Okay, she's already graduated. Yes. In
I believe so,
September,
yeah.
as a 2-year diploma, apply for work in PR. Well, yeah. So it looks like from the very short description, it looks like Phoebe may qualify for the pathway for Hong Kong citizens. Yes, yes, you can. So it would not be CEC. It would be the pathway pilot.
Perfect. The
Let's not
specific
confuse
pathway?
it, but yeah, it's perfect. Like for Hong Kong citizens, if you graduated within the last 5 years and you're working in Canada, it doesn't matter if you're working for 1 day or for 2 years, you can apply.
All right, sounds good. I hope that answered your question, Phoebe. So the next question is from J. Paul. Does half of my course count for CEC if I get in Canada for my second semester?
Well, I assume the course is 1 year, right? So it has to be at least 50% or more. So let's say the course load in your second semester has to be equal or more the course load in your first semester, and yes, you have to be in Canada. If you're in Canada, it will count for CRS points.
Perfect. So the next question is from Janvir. If I get a job letter for NOCB, do I need to work with them even after I got my invitation?
Yes, you have to well, it depends. If you are not having a job offer, then okay, I don't really like the way the question is asked. If I get a letter from them, if you're working for the employer, it's the employer duty to give you a letter, right? So, and if you plan to quit, then whatever you submit, when you submit the application, you have to still be working. Only after you submit the application, if you want to change employer, you may change employers. Again, if the employer did not give you a formal job offer, because for job offer, either LMIA based or LMIA exempt, it's different. But if it's just a confirmation of your employment, then anyone in Canada is free to change employers if you're on a postgraduate work permit.
Perfect. Another question from J. Paul. Can I apply under CEC if I will work as office assistant or private secretary for a realtor?
Well, you go to the page which says find by no code. And when you find the no code of your work, you see you match your duties to the NOC code. So if your duties match the office clerk, which is NOC C, then yeah, no, you can't. If your duties match those which pertain to the application, to the administrative assistant rather, then yes, you can, if it's not B. So again, it doesn't matter how your title is called in the real estate office. What it matters, what duties have you been performing? It has to be a match for the lead statement. It has to be a total match, and then it has to be half or more of all duties of the administrative assistant, not B. So yes, again, it depends on the duties you perform.
Perfect. Another question from anonymous attendee. Being an IT student, I have more than 3 years experience in non-technical field in my home country. So should this experience be counted while applying for PR?
If this experience is in NOC occupation 0A or B, yes, it will. Lucky you.
Perfect. Um, the next question is how much time it takes to get the post-graduation work permit as my course ends in the month of December.
It's not important to get an actual physical piece of paper. It's important to qualify and submit it. Once you submit your postgraduate work permit, the next day you can start working without waiting for the result. Or hopefully you submitted everything and you will be approved.
And they will be under implied
Under
status.
implied status. They call this
Okay.
maintained status, but it's the same thing, implied or maintained status.
Okay, awesome. Um, the last question is an employer is offering me a lead hand job what things should I check before joining?
Okay, first of all, you have to check if this job is NOC B. If it's skilled. I don't know what it means, frankly speaking. I will have to look in the description of job duties. Again, if the employer is offering you a job, it's nearly not enough information to say anything. So, will this be counted as arranged employment job offer? Will the employer plan to support you for Ontario Nominee program? Will the employer plan to submit the labor market impact assessment application with Service Canada? It all it's all important. So for example, for Ontario, if you plan to get an arranged employment points, then it has to be LMIA. For LMIA, obviously it has to be NOC B and prevailing wages. For Ontario PNP, the employer has to be established in Ontario and have, if it's a GTA, have a revenue of 1 million or more. So if you really want to me to answer this question in details, you will need more information and maybe book an individual session.
All
So
right.
generally, what you check that the employer is legitimate, that you are being paid the right wages. But for CEC perspective, from the CEC perspective, you check only that it's an occupation in NOC 0A or B.
All right. So I think we have covered all questions today. Thank you again for everyone for joining us today. We will send out a survey after this webinar. So if you have any feedback or suggestion, please let us know. And thank you, Julia, for helping us hosting this informative webinar.
You're very welcome. If I didn't answer, if I didn't answer the question, if you didn't get the information you wanted when I answered the question, and if you have a complicated situation which cannot be tackled in the format of this seminar for everybody, you may just want to book an individual consultation. So to student services.
Perfect. Thank you so much again. And I hope everyone is enjoying your reading week and have a great long weekend, everyone.
Yeah,
Goodbye for
happy
now.
Canada Day.
Yeah, happy Canada Day.
Bye, everybody. Stay
Bye,
safe.
everyone.